Thank you for the natural lull. Welcome, everyone. I'm Megan Ross, and I serve as a board member for the LBJ Future Forum. On behalf of the Future Forum, thank you all for joining us this evening. Before we begin, I'd like to share a little bit about Future Forum. We're an initiative of the LBJ Presidential Library dedicated to fostering bipartisan discussions, networking opportunities, and community events that inspire a higher level of political discourse and community engagement in Austin. Our mission is rooted in one of President Lyndon Johnson's favorite Bible verses, "Come, let us reason together." Through this, we strive to create civil, informed, and bipartisan discussions. If you're not already a member, I encourage you to sign up tonight. Members enjoy first access to events like this and happy hours, networking opportunities, and special perks at the LBJ Library. Next week on March 3rd, we're hosting a conversation exploring the death penalty in Texas with filmmaker Richard Linklater, journalist and author Maurice Chama, and attorney Estelle Hebron-Jones. Other upcoming events include a one-on-one with Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham and a discussion of the Affordable Care Act 15 years after its signing. If you'd like to learn more, please visit us at our membership table in the back. Now on to tonight's event. Austin takes pride in being the live music capital of the world, home to greats like Austin City Limits, the longest-running music TV series in the world, and iconic blues venue Antone's, which turns 50 this year. As Austin continues to grow, the city is challenged by how to maintain a creative spirit and be a welcoming and supportive place for artists. Tonight, we'll reflect on its current landscape and what it's meant for our landmark venues, small businesses, and local musicians in this ever-changing industry. Tonight's conversation is generously sponsored by the Downtown Austin Alliance. Moderating tonight's discussion is Andy Langer, Senior Director of Live Music and Entertainment for UT Austin. Please keep in mind there will be time for questions at the end of the program. For now, please join me in giving a warm welcome to our speakers.
Very quick. Do I have a microphone? I think you're testing. There we are. Okay. Terry Lickona's down there. Lickona Vision is his. Austin City Limits, the television show, is his, for all intents and purposes. Let's just go with that.
Why not? Why not?
Will Bridges, Antone's, Arlyn, bunch of other things. Carrie Rodriguez, one of the most celebrated singer-songwriters and fiddle players in our town, and that's Graham Williams. Resound is his. So, before this gets dark, I'm going to flip what I normally do, and normally as a way out, I say, what are we hopeful about? Let's start with what we're hopeful about, and then we'll work our way back towards darkness. So, is there something recently that's made you hopeful about the state of Austin music? Will?
Well, you know me, I'm kind of a contrarian on this topic, and we've got so much to be hopeful for right now at Antone's with the 50th anniversary this year. You don't get to ask all the big favors on your 49th or your 51st, so we've got to be optimistic this year, and there's a lot of cool peripheral projects in the works celebrating the 50th. It's a culmination of the last 10 years since kind of my generation got involved, so to speak. So we're excited for the future. I always like to say we're a young town, and even as old as it seems to have a venue turning 50, I'm 42. I've got 50-year-old friends that don't seem that old, so we're just getting warmed up. And you know, the external landscape keeps changing, and there's new obstacles, but we also have a lot of momentum as a city. I think it's just, you know, nights like tonight and kind of reaching consensus as a community about how we want to prioritize our creative sector and how we want that future to look like. I think we have a lot of say over that, but it's going to take action, not just words.
I mean, Antone's 50. Austin City Limits, the television show 50. I just got done doing a run of 45th anniversary Cactus Cafe shows. There's a lot. The Armadillo World Headquarters is now a thing, at least as a brand. Do we spend too much time looking back, or are these institutions the reason people came here in the first place, and people aren't going to get tired of celebrating them?
I think we're at risk for that, excuse me, because in fact, a friend of mine recently made the observation to me that you know you're getting old when you start spending too much time talking about what happened and looking back at the past as opposed to what you're doing in the here and now and what you hope to be doing in the future. And I think that applies to just about anything, including music venues and just the state of Austin music, for that matter. I'm grateful, first of all, that there is still a music scene in Austin, and I'm certainly hopeful that that'll continue to grow and to prosper. And you know, there are any number of relatively new music venues, and why in God's name somebody would want to start a music venue and hope to make a living, or at least survive from doing that? Who knows? But the fact is that there are still people who do that. There are still musicians and artists who make it their goal, their passion to play at those venues. So I'm a big believer in Austin's music scene today, and hopefully tomorrow as well.
And to that end, I keep thinking there's this generation of kids, we'll call them, who are at clubs that none of us go to, who to them, that's their Liberty Lunch, or that's their Armadillo. I mean, they're having those moments, and a lot of those clubs, you're putting the music on stage.
Yeah. And maybe I'm not going as much as I used to either, but yeah, I guess I'm probably a little bit more optimistic as well as what the future lies. I don't know. Austin's always been this like train that's been moving forward ever since I was a kid. It was obviously a much smaller town when I was born in the late 70s, but I've just watched it grow constantly. It's never been this like the sleepy town that so many people remember that they're looking back on. It's always been a place that new venues are opening all the time, new bands are starting. Right now, I think there's a kind of a nice balance of like respecting the history of Austin and the legacy spaces, the legacy TV shows, the legacy record labels and radio stations and artists, as well as like new acts developing. But I think part of that's just that we've grown so fast. Like there's a lot of scenes, there's people who appreciate certain stuff, and then there's young kids who probably won't ever really know about it. And there's enough people in a city of 2 million people that works. And I guess I haven't seen it hit a wall yet. I feel like we're still moving forward and continuing to grow, and new artists are popping up constantly. To Terry's point, I think the folks who are part of like, if we want to call it like the legacy brands, do need to constantly keep up with what's happening now. I think that's probably the bigger issue than it is those brands being forgotten. It's kind of on those particular businesses to continue to do new things, respect and love what they've always done, but also branch out and do more. And I remember back when I still worked at Emo's, like Terry calling me once and we didn't know each other, and you were like, we're looking into newer artists. Like, who are some bands locally that are starting to play? And I was like, how cool that Terry and the folks at ACL are like trying to find out about new bands, when a lot of other folks in your same exact shoes would have just said like, we stick with what we know, and we're not comfortable with what's new. So I don't know. I mean, Antone's has expanded as far as the stuff it puts on its stage constantly. So I don't know. I think there's a pretty good balance right now, but there is always that danger, whether it's internal, us as businesses and music business people, like not, taking that next step, or whether it's external and it is the city and the changes in the community and the population just shifting things out of our control. But yeah, I honestly think we're just on this like surfboard trying to keep moving forward.
I mean, and I guess this is for Will and Graham. It's always been a small margin business, clubs, live music venues. That's got to be exponentially harder now, where money's just harder to come by, period. I mean, is that the daily grind, figuring out other ways to monetize the club than just the live music aspect of it?
it's become an important part of the recipe, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. The pandemic certainly thrust everyone into a reality in which grants and sponsorships and private parties kind of were a necessary part of the equation. Any reluctance to accept that pre-pandemic was kind of maybe a kind of stubborn artist thing. I used to say, or I like to say, music doesn't mind a hookup, but it doesn't like a handout. There's pride in being able to run these businesses in a viable way because it means that our accountability or our integrity isn't being swayed by outside interests. But in and of themselves, I don't really believe that music venues are meant to have anything beyond small margins, because what would they do with that money? They're really economic engines. Well, I mean, you know, everyone should have a job and stuff like that, but they're economic engines, and they have a really strong ROI back to the economy via vendors, local musicians, of course, and local music industry professionals. And so kind of like a nonprofit almost, you know, you don't want them hoarding their profits. If they're making money, it should be going right back into the economy, the facilities. And especially when a good portion of that can stay local, which for smaller clubs, that skews a little bit more that kind of local reinvestment in the community. It's a different type of return.
We're going to revisit that return in a second in the sense that the city sense and what the city is or isn't doing. But Carrie, you grew up here, and initially, the early part of your career, you were mostly on the road.
Yeah,
And now you're mostly home.
I am. Yeah.
Could you have done what you did 15, or now? Could you have done what you did 15 years ago now, I guess is the question. Like, how much harder is this landscape?
Yeah, it does look very difficult from the outside. Just when I look at young artists who are first getting started, I really don't know how they get their foot in the door. I mean, just the way, music is shared and radio, the way radio works now. I don't know how. Although, I mean, the one thing, going back to like what I see as hopeful, I'm really amazed at how the city is supporting its artists right now. I mean, the money, the grant money, it's significant, and it's making a big difference. I mean, they're putting money into like musicians who want to make records. They're putting money into these arts nonprofits, and there's also a lot of collaboration between nonprofits right now in Austin. And it seems to me like it's really helping us all figure out how to keep going. So hopefully, if I were giving like advice to a young musician first starting out, I would definitely encourage them to learn all they can about the money that's out there that the city's providing, but also to get aligned with arts nonprofit organizations and find out, I mean, there are nonprofit record labels, right? Spaceflight, how cool is that? Like, that's, to me, that's hopeful, and it is a way to, you know, have a sustainable career in music, actually.
Even when they were major labels, they were nonprofit for the artists.
Well,
so
right. And being a musician has always been nonprofit in my experience, but I'm finally just learning how to make that legit. And no, but it is encouraging. The city is actually doing a lot financially right now for musicians.
I'd second that with venues as well. I mean, you know, I don't want to give the city too much credit or they might stop, but they have been a lot more supportive of the music business in Austin as of late, whether it's venues, record labels, musicians. But on the business side, there's a lot of tax rebates at the state level that didn't exist before that are coming back to a lot of the venues. There's a lot of grants. There's a lot of programs through various nonprofits in town that are supporting artists year-round. They're supporting venues year-round. You know, it's not going to make or break a venue, I don't think, but it's, hugely important to have these other revenue streams, as you said, as things have gotten more and more expensive.
Well, it's got to be important that it doesn't make or break a venue, because all those things could go away.
100%. I mean, in the
And
end,
we've seen them cycle through.
I guess
we've
that's
seen the
why
city
I'm-
be
yeah.
interested and then not interested.
That's
We've
why I'm
seen-
always like cautiously optimistic about it, because it could change, and I don't want to see that happen. But at the same time, it's like we've all been getting by, and I used to complain that I didn't want anything from the city. We didn't want funding. We weren't asking for that. We would simply ask, like, get out of our way. Like, let us be businesses. You know, there were so many regulations and so many things that would come into play for owning a venue that made it really hard for this thing that makes almost no money. And then I feel like it's almost come full circle where now you've got the city recognizing, thanks to the, some of the studies that were done over the years that some of the folks here have been involved with, and I thank them for doing that, that I feel like woke up some of the folks in the planning commissions and the music commissions to say, like, well, I mean, at this point, we are taking hotel taxes, we are making a lot of money at the city level, and we're calling ourselves the music capital of the world, but what are we really doing for music? We just happen to have a lot of music here that operates completely independent from city and state funding. So it's amazing that it's starting to, at least post-pandemic, swing the other direction for now and support some of the independent businesses and artists.
I mean, do we think that's a silver lining of the pandemic, that the pandemic seemed to have, the real direness of it seemed to have caught the attention of the city, of people that write grants, et cetera, et cetera?
In so many ways. And it's not just the city of Austin in terms of as a governmental institution, but the people, the community of Austin, including individuals, whether they're the Gary Kellers of the world or the people who are partnering with John at Waterloo Records to give them a future, which otherwise, who knows if it would happen or not. I think it's kind of unrealistic to be self-sufficient or self-sustaining in today's world. You need those kinds of partnerships like Antone's has forged in recent years as well. And Austin City Limits. I mean, the city of Austin, its convention center department, is the largest underwriter and longest term underwriter the show has. But other businesses like Cirrus Logic as well have stepped in there. Dell has been an underwriter and a supporter for decades now too. So it takes that kind of partnership, but the community of Austin, the people of Austin just don't get as much credit as they deserve. And I tell people this, that Austin City Limits would probably never have begun or certainly wouldn't exist after 50 years if it were anywhere else. There's just something about that, the spirit and the heart and soul of Austin that, thank God and fingers crossed, hasn't changed enough yet to make it a different place, a place that we don't want to be a part of.
But even for the first 20 or so years, even of Austin City Limits, even if it was some combination of Austin and national acts, it was an advertisement for Austin. People immediately wanted to come here and visit the park that they thought it was shot in, et cetera.
Well, it's gone.
But
I had $1 for every time somebody thought that the
But
other.
I guess my thing has always been that there's been no concerted effort to market to the newcomers, and we know there's a bunch of them, particularly post-pandemic from California, New York, et cetera, and say this is part of the DNA. You go to see live music. This is what it means to live in Austin. And I wonder if that's not the problem down the line, is that we didn't do enough to teach these folks that that's part of living here, and that's what makes it different than living in the place they came from.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think maybe because we assume it's a given and we take it for granted that people are coming to Austin because of all the cool music and film and outdoors activities and the hipness and blah, 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 blah. But in the end, we've also complained, at least I have, that often folks move in to the city, and I'm not one of those like, get out of here, don't leave Austin types. I don't really care. I think it's good for the economy. Very few people are from Austin. But at the same time, people will move in, things will get torn down and built without a thought, and there are people who have come to our community and not really understood why this, that, and the other are important. So yeah, to some degree, I think like that does need to get baked in, whether it's a marketing campaign or just simply embracing that from the jump. But yeah, good point. I mean, I kind of feel like that's been lacking a bit.
Yeah, me too. I'm always wondering, how do I reach those people? Like, and are they going to the smaller clubs and the longtime Austin venues? I don't think I mean, I'm sure some are, but how do you educate them? I don't quite know, but I would like to get them in there.
Yeah.
We need them.
You know, KUTX does a great job of showcasing local Austin and Texas artists, but how does that translate to getting those people who listen and discover somebody new by listening to KUTX to go to the club to maybe see them live or to see somebody else live who might be just as good but not as well known yet? I don't know what it takes in an age where there are so many other distractions, shall we say, whether they're on your phone or just somewhere else, that people aren't as inspired as they were back in the day to want to get in their car and go to a club, either on South Congress, if anybody still wants to go there. But there are still good places for live music down there. It's just not quite as accessible as it used to be, as we all know. But yeah, what does it take to really want to encourage and inspire people of any age to want to get out and see live music other than the occasional show at Moody Theater or at Moody Center or one of the other various Moody's around town?
Well, and to teach them the difference between them.
Oh, good luck.
Which
Good
is
luck
this
with
whole, yeah. I mean, Carrie, I referred to you largely being at home these days. I mean, you've got a job at the university as the songwriter in residence, and you did a big thing there at the McCulloch Theater, and a new original work, and you've got your thing at the Paramount. But you talk to colleagues and other musicians who I'm sure are telling you that it's almost impossible to tour right now.
Yeah.
That it's
Oh yeah, it looks very unappealing to me.
which I
Happy to be
imagine
on.
is a problem for you, and it's a problem if everyone stays home and overplays the market. So it's a problem getting touring acts here because touring is just that much more difficult. I mean, is that right?
I hear that a lot. I haven't experienced it as much as you would think. I think it kind of depends on what level you're at as an artist. Maybe the venues we book are a little bit easier to tour into. I don't know. Maybe that's not true. I'm seeing a lot of artists still touring. I am hearing that a lot from artists nationally and locally, that the cost of gas, the cost of everything is so expensive. And while you can charge more for a ticket now than you could pre-pandemic, at least most of the folks I know do, and that's been one upside, there is a limit, and it has gotten harder. So I can't speak to what I don't know. I mean, could it be 20% busier if things were a bit more affordable on the road? Probably. But I am seeing a lot of people still tour to Austin. It's still like a must stop. And it wasn't always like that. I mean, maybe for different genres, maybe because blues was always big here. Blues was a must stop. But for a lot of artists, when I was a kid in the 90s, like they would do Dallas, Houston, and never played Austin. Like, unless it was like Liberty Lunch level or bigger, a lot of acts just couldn't afford to make that extra trip. Texas is massive. The cost of gas and a hotel room, if you could even afford a hotel room, often ate up whatever you had to get out of Texas and make it to whatever state you were going to. So I felt like people were skipping Austin a lot, and now I feel like if you're going to go anywhere in Texas, that's your one place you cannot miss. So I don't know. It's sort of in between, I would say, but I'm still seeing a lot of traffic in terms of touring artists. I can't speak for local artists and how many of them are getting out of Austin right now versus just playing here in town, but anyway.
Are you seeing friends leave
Like,
for cheaper cities? More affordable cities?
I mean, most of my musician friends here are pretty dug in.
Okay.
You know, yeah. But I do think that a lot of the musicians who have chosen, to stay here are definitely diversifying in terms of what they do with music. And I know I certainly have diversified, and I do so many different things that are music related, but it's not all going to play Carrie Rodriguez shows. That would never, ever feed my family. But it's really, for me, it's been a positive thing. I started this music series, Laboratorio, and we bring in artists from everywhere, from outside of Austin, to collaborate with us. And I still get to learn from them and perform, but we're also helping them because they're not having to come in with their full band. Like, we've got Calexico collaborating with us in May at the Paramount, and they're bringing 4 band members versus 8. So it is a much more affordable way for them to come. We've got a great band we're, combining with them, and it'll be a show that no one's ever seen before. So I think we just have to get really creative to continue to live here and play music.
I mean, will you think about affordability a lot between all of your things? And you've got a hand in restaurants too. Is the affordability issue the thing that sort of changed the most with the growth issue?
Yes, but it shifted things. So while Austin has become a harder place to call home for local musicians, it's become a better place to tour for outside musicians. So we've become more of an import city than an export city. We were never a huge export city. Moody Center has been a big addition to our touring ecosystem. I have defended the live music capital of the world moniker for over 15 years from kind of varying qualitative measures. But I think today is probably, we have a better case at that being true quantitatively today than ever in the history of Austin. So much of it just comes back to the question that you asked, which is analogous to the question of what is so special about Austin. People want to be here. They want to be here if they're a musician. They want to be here if they just like going to see live music. And the instruction manual on, hey, by the way, you're supposed to do that, seems to be intuitive. Could we be doing a better job of spelling it out for people just in case? Absolutely. But we're all still a little bit, I think, punch drunk on this thing that we still can't put our finger on, that is Austin. That is just kind of, I call it the pursuit of discovery, where people get here and they feel like, okay, I've got to go one up my friend who told me about this one band. The taco truck that they told me about, oh man, everybody knows about that taco truck. You got to go find this other taco truck. So I don't know where that comes from, but that is a really, really valuable part of our DNA.
I think it comes from TikTok. Let's look, if we look at 10 or 15 years ago, there was people like yourselves that couldn't, not you four, but that couldn't be in the same room together because there was whatever drama. And it feels like that's gone away. You've got a festival, there's a festival attached to the Austin City Limits brand. You've got a festival, yet you all have relationships with each of the C3 folks. It's not as much have or have not or beef over big versus small. It seems like a lot of that's gone away. Is that?
Yeah, I think so, and I think that kind of gets back to that sense of community that makes Austin different. The state of Austin music is one thing, the state of Austin's music business is another. It's never really been all about the business unless you're at the level of a Moody Center or C3 where they do quite well business-wise. But otherwise, it's more that, again, getting back to the heart and soul of what makes Austin the live music capital of the world, whether that's a little overblown, and granted it is, but when you have a world-class arena like the Moody Center, but you also have your funky dive bars and clubs like Hotel Vegas or the 4 Out Lounge, that are doing well enough to still survive and get people to come in and hear music. But there are so many other variables. People aren't as much going out to drink as they used to, including the younger demo. So they may not just go to the Hole in the Wall or a dive bar to spend the night having a few beers and by happenstance stumbled upon some good music and pay enough at the door to be able to pay the band something for their efforts that night. So how you factor all of those different things into the dynamic of what drives and inspires people to want to go out and hear live music, how to get them out there in the first place, whether it's out of curiosity or just to go out to have a beer.
Will, have you thought about, with this big round number coming up, there were times, I was there when they raided the tip jars at the one on Guadalupe. Clifford would have we're this close to going out of business party. every couple months because it looked that way. Do you think about all the times 50 didn't seem likely even for an iconic brand?
For sure. And we like to say that, well, we like to make things look easy, but sometimes we say maybe we're making it look too easy because the idea that Antone's some foregone conclusion of ongoing success is totally not the case. It's still touch and go. The main reason is for every dollar we make, we're putting $1.05 into something because that's, I think, the role we play in the ecosystem. So it's
Because what would you do with money?
well, we spend it on developing careers of artists and music industry professionals and sound gear, and so I think, and some of this comes from, I grew up working in service from a young age and also have other F&B hospitality businesses. So I came at Antone's, even though I had some experience as a small independent promoter, sound booker, or band booker. I really came at it more of like a bar or F&B or hospitality operation. And then music's kind of like what we get to do for fun if we do the other parts right. So to answer your question, we never take it for granted, and longevity has always been a battle cry of Antone's, though it's unique, one, to have a venue that's lasted 50 years, even more unique to have a venue that's on its 6th location in said time. That tenacity certainly came from Clifford, and his tenacity certainly came from his passion for preserving these genres of music that were so near and dear to his heart. And I think we're so there's a handful of really important venues that kind of wrote that story of what helped Austin become this music city. Antone's was just one of them, but it's been obviously like an honor to steward that, and so we just kind of have a never say die attitude. And I hate to give so much credit to the pandemic still, but to go back a question, I also think that's what created a little more camaraderie perhaps in the community, because we all went through that together. It's also just the bigger Austin gets, kind of the smaller our bubble gets. But it created a tenacity too. It's like, if that thing didn't kill us, you feel a little bit, road tested for whatever comes ahead.
Well, and consumers, meaning the music fans, they missed the experience. Clearly, musicians missed the experience.
Yeah.
And everyone was rearing to get going when they got back. There's that element of the pandemic too, I would imagine. Do you remember what your first gig after the pandemic was like?
I cried on stage.
Okay.
For sure. Yeah, and I think it did. It showed everybody how valuable live music is, and so it allowed us to raise ticket prices. And nobody blinks anymore, and yes, a ticket should be $50 if you've got 8 musicians on stage and they're coming from. So I think that's been really helpful. It just showed us the real value of it.
Graham, I imagine you hear from people first. You're among those first calls when somebody's going to open a venue or thinking about opening a venue, because they need to find somebody to book it. And when you have those conversations these days, what is it like?
I get a good amount of them, but usually from not so much the Wills of the world, probably more someone on the outskirts that thought it would be a good idea or has an event space that wants to start doing shows. Usually those don't really overlap with like the kind of music we're booking, and I don't even mean genre-wise. I mean maybe we're booking more for the music community, and these places are a little bit more ancillary. So more often I feel I get hip about those. It's either that or it's the polar opposite. It's people who just love music. And for them, it's kind of a catch-22. Either they're going to crush it because they're going to be so passionate about it, they're going to put everything into it and figure out a way to make it work, and more power to them, or the opposite. They're going to go in with all their heart and lose a lot of money. So I'm always a little cautious about telling folks like, yeah, invest in a venue because it's not easy. And, you know, to Will's point, you know, we try and make it look easy, but it's not an insanely profitable. I mean, not for Will, apparently. For me, I'm crushing it. But I do think that there's this constant like battle with, you know, artists, community, yourself to try and like do the triangle so everything works perfectly. And at the end of the year, you're kind of just getting where you need to keep going to the next year sometimes. And we've got our good quarters and our bad quarters and things like South by Southwest, and other times of the year we all see spikes. But for the most part, it is kind of a passion project. You do it because you love it, whether it's playing music or producing concerts or festivals. And if you can make a living doing it and you have a job doing it and you can employ other people, then that's amazing. You know, at the end of your life, that's what you did. You did what you wanted, and you supported other people doing what they wanted. And that's kind of been the goal, at least for most of the folks at a club level that I know. So yeah, we're able to kind of continue forward with that. For new people who want to open venues and be promoters, again, that's sort of my advice usually is if you love it and you want to do it, you know, it's a DIY ethic. You have to look at it that way. If you're going to try and make this super successful business out of it, great, go for it. But keep in mind that like if it's not really exciting, the P&L won't look that pretty.
I mean, I say this in the nicest way possible, but your business has had a couple names over the years.
Exactly.
You've had some flame out. You've had big
for sure.
flame outs.
Yeah, for sure.
What's different now about the way you do business? Because you've clearly figured it out. Or figured it out for now.
Yeah, I'm still learning. I didn't go to college. I would say most of the flameouts were kind of bad partnerships, to be honest. So those were more like we wanted to keep doing music. One of our partners thought maybe we should just do private events, not concerts. And we were like, oh, well, our entire company is booking shows. So the first time we just left to continue doing music, changed the name. And the second time was COVID. Like when it hit us, unlike Will and some of the other folks, like we didn't own a venue. We were an outside promoter. We had a bunch of contracts with venues, but we didn't have to keep paying a mortgage or rent. So we had to just turn off the faucet. Little by little, we let people go during COVID, furloughed people left and right. And I don't know if y'all remember, it was going to be a 6-week flattening the curve. It went past 6 weeks. So when we just turned off the faucet, we restarted it, rebranded, and relaunched. So there was a lot of learning during those moments. But at this point, I think that was our learning experience, was just years of trying different things until we figured out what worked. And post-pandemic, there have been some pluses. There have been a lot of adjustments in the business in general. And we just learned as we've gone to kind of become a stronger business and be able to support our staff and the music scene and the artists we work with.
I think Graham's just really good at coming up with cool company names,
Yeah.
and he wants to get
he
them
just
all
wants
in.
to use them.
I got a bunch of them.
I mean, to hear you say, you know, Antone's is still a day-to-day, you know, concern, even if, you know, you're hopeful and doing well.
Well, as it should be. Well, sorry.
Oh.
about that. And just because
okay,
what I mean by that is you're not supposed to make money. It just means as it should be, because you should continue kind of being bold and not, if you get comfortable,
Right.
then you're not really maximizing your utility as a, yeah.
The elephant in the room is that after 50 years, there's a federal government now that seems disinterested, so to speak, in public television.
Public media in general,
In
and I'm glad
general.
you brought that up, because it is ironic, to say the least, that, you know, we're sitting in the LBJ Presidential Library, and it was Lyndon Johnson who signed into existence public broadcasting back in 1968. And it was only 6 years later that Willie Nelson wandered into Studio 6A to tape that pilot episode for Austin City Limits. Because at the time, once there was such a thing as public broadcasting, television, and public radio, of course, you know, programmers and local stations around the country were scrambling to come up with some ideas for programs to feed to the system. But here we are, to what you were saying and your question about ever expecting to see that big number, 50. as a testament to your success at that milestone. No, we certainly weren't anticipating that ourselves. And in getting back to the pandemic 5 years ago, if there was anything that could possibly shut down Austin City Limits, we thought that was it for sure. And yet we managed to tape 7 shows that first year in our studio with no audience. And that's when we called in Ruthie Foster and Jackie Benson, and we had the Mavericks drive down from Nashville to do it. And we were able to pull it off, and they were all live streamed, those shows. And we've continued to try to do that with a lot of our other tapings so that people not only in Austin but around the world could see whoever it is from wherever they are. But here we are at a time when the very existence and future of public media is at stake. And I think people need to stop and think about that. There would never have been an Austin City Limits if it weren't for the Public Broadcasting Act that LBJ signed. And it certainly could not continue without that kind of support from not just the community of Austin, the city of Austin, the people of Austin, but the federal government funding is a big part of paying our operating expenses, not just for Austin PBS, but for PBS stations and NPR stations everywhere in the country. So, you know, there's more to it than just saving. I think it's like 1 penny per taxpayer goes towards the support of funding public media. You know, is it worth it? I think a lot of people would agree.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just you folks at KLRU and at PBS, it's, you know, the folks at KUT and KUTX.
Absolutely.
And they're not even in a position, because they're part of the university, where they can say, write your congressman, because they're a state entity who aren't even allowed to say, write your congressman.
Yeah.
Whereas I guess you guys can.
Our CEO is in Washington as we speak this week, having strategic meetings with people who they hope will continue to support funding public media in the future. So, yeah, it's gonna be a challenge. Well, let's leave it at that.
When we were talking before about sort of, and I don't want to discount the fact that there are obviously, like I said, kids who, you know, some of the places, Graham books, those are their Liberty lunches and whatnot. But is the graying of Austin or of the Austin music audience a problem?
The grain, I'm sorry?
The graying. I mean, they're getting older.
Yeah.
And, you know, and so even if we talk about KUTX, we talk about radio in general, it can obviously be a driver for discovery, but if nobody under 25's listening to radio, then eventually that catches up.
Mm-hmm. I don't see that.
Okay.
And my guess is Terry doesn't see that with his show. We both have the luxury of having these kind of household names with Austin music and a diverse kind of buffet of offerings. And so I see a very healthy kind of age demographic in terms of, you know, I'm now a parent of 2 and can't get out as much, but when we do, it's usually to see live music, and I feel like there's, I feel like my kind of peer group are similarly minded. They're not scenesters, but it's still, I'm not worried about people not kind of following that tradition of being big music fans.
I mean, there's no denying that seeing live music is a whole different experience than looking at a YouTube video on your phone or even watching Austin City Limits live stream, you know, on the internet. But we'd also be naive to not even think that that's what we need to do. We need to take that experience and translate it to any number of platforms so that people can enjoy one particular song, whether it's a new show that we just did or it's a show from 1982, you know, with Ray Charles or Tom Waits. So you got to do both, but still that experience of being in the room, and you can talk to anybody who's done that and loves to do that, and the artist who's on that stage and experiences that exchange of energy and spirit with a live audience. And no matter what the size, whether it's the Moody Center or it's Hotel Vegas, it's something that's, how do you communicate that to other people? How do you inspire people to want to go out and see what it's like for themselves, and to continue to do that and spend the money, whether it's to see a big show at the Moody Center or out at the amphitheater, or just go to some little hotel Vegas or dive bar experience to see somebody with an acoustic guitar. It's not quite the same at the Austin airport, but to their credit, they at least try to give a taste of what the live music scene is all about.
Is one of the things that this scene does best supporting its nonprofits? Because it seems like Ham is a global model for what they do. Sims, everyone on this panel knows somebody whose life was saved by Sims. There's Home, there's Dawa. I mean, I could go down the list.
Swan songs, yeah.
Swan songs. I mean, and that's Willie. I mean, I'm not giving him all the credit, but I think Willie early on, it was how do we make a difference? Oh, we play a benefit. For Willie, it was playing the benefits. I mean, and you've played 1,000 benefits.
Yeah.
Is that maybe the sort of the best thing we've done over a long period of time, is keep all these nonprofits functioning?
I think it certainly ranks up there, because I can't think of another city anywhere that has made the effort, and when I say city, I mean the people of that city, to create these not-for-profit organizations that serve musicians and artists on so many different levels compared to Austin. And they have, thrived is not maybe the best word to use, but they continue to exist and persist and to grow and do the job and to fulfill the mission that they were created for. It's a unique thing about Austin at a time when artists need it more than ever.
I mean, Will, the club is constantly doing benefits for other folks. I mean, that's part of doing business in this town.
Yeah, that's part of the culture, taking care of each other, and that's part of that community, and that's what the nonprofits are, just kind of a more sophisticated organization of that same sentiment. So, yeah, we've been really lucky that we've been able to harbor that community enough time for those things to evolve.
And Carrie, how do you decide which of those to play?
Yeah, you can't do them all.
I know,
You
and
can't,
that's
but you can do a lot, and I do. I mean, I try to do as much as I can fit in that works with my family and my schedule. But it's really important, and it makes our community a better place to live, and having an organization like Ham makes it possible for more musicians to stay here. So I mean, all of these things are just so crucial, and make Austin what it is. So it's really important to give time.
I mean, one of you, I can't remember, alluded to the fact that it's never really been a music business town. I mean, and that's blessing and curse. I mean, it'd be real easy to sort of list the pros and cons to having never been a music business town.
Yeah, I feel like we're still catching up there. I mean, it's more of a music hobby town. I think most people I know play in bands do it on the side. Carrie's made her career at it, and as she said, she's had to adjust how she plays music and the various things she does. I know very few musicians who make a living off of playing. I don't even think I know that many musicians who actually have it as like a side hustle. Like, it's enough to pay for the rehearsal place, some studio time, and it's their passion. Just like, honestly, most artists. Like, there are tons of people at home who paint on the weekends, but they're not making a living doing it either. Austin's just always supported that. If it was a passion project to own a venue, even if you're not really successful, or promote shows or do festivals or play music, I think that's also why maybe nonprofits have worked here so well, because people are so music-minded as their hobby, as their interest, as their passion, whether they're performing it or whether they're fans. I think that's a way people are able to give back. If you you're not a musician yourself, but you love music and you want to see it grow and you want to be a part of the music community. Some people make a fanzine or do a radio show or donate their time to KUT or a co-op or one of those type of stations. Some people work at nonprofits and support the music business that way. Some people have a corporate job, but they donate to those. They put money into Black Fret. They become members of different groups because they want to support music and be a part of the scene even though they aren't musicians themselves. So I feel like there's a lot of that in Austin. Some people serve in government and with a focus on supporting music and arts here. So it's interesting. Like I travel so much, and whenever we get in conversations, people are always so shocked about Austin. Like you have all these nonprofits. There's healthcare for musicians. There's grants that help musicians to replace what labels used to pay them. There's a music commission at the city. The city has a program. Like there's funding. Like we kind of take it for granted because for so long it was just the hobby that got nothing from anyone but ourselves. But ourselves is a lot of people. Like there's a big enough music scene. And because we don't have a big giant national sports team or whatever the thing is that most cities have that get them excited about their community, we do have this like big thriving like music and art scene. And that's where people kind of put their time and effort in. And, even like your average working for the weekend person, Ginny in HR in the cubicle is like, what are you doing this weekend? I'm going to a show at Antone's. Like that's not most cities. Like I was in Chicago a year ago and my cab driver was like, I was producing some concert there and he was dropping me off at the venue. And he was like, oh, yeah, I went to my first concert and I thought he meant post-pandemic. I was like, oh yeah, since you got out of the pandemic? No, first ever. This guy was older than me. He had tattoos. He didn't look like a guy who would have never seen a band. He's like, I saw Metallica. I always loved Metallica. I was like, so you like music and that was your first show and you're 50? Like, it was shocking. Like, no one here has not been to multiple shows. They have sometimes multiple shows a week, but that's not everywhere. I did some work with Spotify. And this was a guy who worked at Spotify who told me the exact same thing. Same thing. He was like, I went to my first show and I thought he meant post-pandemic. And he was like, I was like, oh, you went to that LCD sound system show after the pandemic got out? And he was like, no, my first show ever. I've never been to one. I love music. I mean, I work here. I was like, right. This is why people, if you complain about Spotify, it's because some of the employees haven't seen music. But they stream the shit out of it. But that's not uncommon, I guess is my point. Like you travel, Chicago, New York, those were those two people. They lived in Chicago and New York and neither of them had seen a concert before. One was 50, one was in his 20s. Both were massive music fans. They had never seen a band.
About Austin, I shouldn't be surprised to go to a doctor a while back who knows what I do and happens to mention that, yeah, I'm in a band with a couple of the nurses and this other doctor friend of mine. We do 80s cover songs, we just get together once. And I have another, my cardiologist is a member of a ukulele club, which...
My doctor has a record deal too.
Which
no, for real.
Okay, well, there you go. I mean, what is it about Austin that makes doctors or whoever want to live here, but
I thought I was
also be a
old
part
until
of
these
that?
guys are like, my cardiologist, my urologist said he plays drums in the band.
But Terry, if we had a music row in 1975,
Thank God Austin never turned into Nashville as far as that goes.
or the kind of, because Terry also works on the Grammys, the kind of business that's there in LA. If we had something like that in the 70s or 80s here, how different would everything? Would there be an Austin city limits that could last to 50? Would there? I get it's hypothetical, but
I don't know that it would have made much of a difference, if any. There was Arista, Texas for a minute, when Arista tried to establish a Texas branch here in Austin and sign some acts. I mean, Austin has always been considered more of an incubator than it is a hub for the business side of music, and that's probably a good thing because that gives musicians a chance to just sort of like try things out, get together. Band members come and go. You can play a gig with a band or with a friend or just by yourself and not be so concerned about if it's going to impact your career long term. And I think that's always been the case with Austin, going back to when I first got here back in the 70s to the present time. But it does help if you have a day job, to make ends meet so you can continue to play music on the side and hope and dream that someday it'll become more than just that.
But Carrie, you could be making more money in LA or New York playing fiddle on everyone's records than living here, I would imagine. Even if we took everything out and you were just the fiddle player for hire.
Yuck. I don't want to do that.
But yet you live here and have made this.
Yeah, and I'm just so inspired every day by the diversity of artists that we have here. I mean, it's a rich life, and I cannot imagine having that kind of life of playing on commercial country albums to make money. That's just not a way I would ever want to make money. Ooh.
I was going to say that earlier, that again, it comes back to people choosing to be here. Unlike some of those other cities you just mentioned, artists don't typically say, well, I had to move to Austin. You know. So it's
But I do hear artists say I had to move out of Austin.
Yeah,
sadly.
But it's just a different balancing of priorities. And, the other interesting thing about especially those artists who get kind of dug in, as you mentioned, Carrie, is it gets quite comfortable. You don't really start to compare yourself outside of Austin. I think we use that a little bit as a comfort blanket. Like Graham said, it's a kind of city of hobbyists. Like, we never want to grow up and get a real job, because then that means we would have to really take it seriously and we might fail. One of the old nicknames of the Austin music scene was the Velvet Coffin, because it's
I haven't heard that in a while, but yeah.
And we're a club town. All these things that we grew up, or metaphorically as a city, grew up being our inadequacies. Well, we don't really have any record labels, or we don't really have any publishing. And yeah, we would have probably, I think, had those become the center of attention, we would have certainly become a different type of music city. And it's kind of poetic and a special time for Austin that we now realize we have what everyone else covets, which is actual scene. That's the real magic word, a music scene, and a live music scene, because that's the raw, from the source stuff.
Speaking of which, the late Michael Corcoran has a new book that's just come out, and it's called Austin is a Music Scene, Not a Sound. And that really does sum it up very, very well.
Yeah.
It's always been that way.
He also called this mediocre Texas.
Yeah.
Well, he said a lot of things.
And we love celebrating mediocrity here in Austin as well. That's another thing we...
I think the whole scene thing is true. What Terry was saying, or both of y'all were saying. We do shows in multiple cities, mostly in Austin. Pre-pandemic, we had a Dallas office, so we would do more of that, like 4-city run. We still do some. But Houston, and not knocking Houston, but it was such a tough nut to crack. It's the 4th largest city in America, by far the largest city in Texas. And it's so hard to sell tickets in that city because they don't have as big a music scene. There isn't a strip. It takes an hour to get anywhere. It's hard to drive and then go see a few different shows, go direct, grab a drink, grab something to eat, and go see your band, because everything's spread out. And I have a lot of friends who live there and do shows there and play shows there. And some cities are just harder and have been harder to build a scene, or have had scenes that have kind of gone away and dropped off. But Austin's, whether it's had its ups and downs or not, I guess it's debatable depending on what scene you're in. But overall, Austin has had this kind of consistent music scene since the 60s, and it's continued to grow in some way, shape, or form. And because of that, we've been able to kind of build that community around that. If it weren't for like something vital that fans and people, citizens want to see, I don't think it would exist, at least not the way it does. Because there's no reason that we should sell more tickets in Austin than we do in Houston, but 100 out of 100 shows, that's almost always the case. Wow.
When are we going to get to the dark part, Andy?
I know. We're actually not, because we're going to audience questions. Sarah, you're somewhere with a microphone? Chadwood has a question here.
Here comes a dark question.
Thanks. This is going to be somewhat of a rhetorical question, but it gets into what we were talking about with the nonprofits and the grants of it all. And I guess I can't help but wonder, what could we do for musicians and the music scene if this city could put out its big boy pants as far as philanthropy and taking advantage of the ridiculous amount of money that is happening and flying around in this town? You look at a city like Pittsburgh, which has just a far more advanced philanthropy scene, but we can't seem to get that together. I guess I just throw that out there as I'm not looking for an answer, but I just want to kind of plant the seed of why can't we do that, and what could we do if we could?
I've thought about that quite a bit, and a lot of it is like seeing these people moving into our city, and we know they have money, and we see the cars that they drive.
Or in one case, the cars that they're manufacturing.
Yes, but
And he's given nothing to anyone.
Exactly. I know. It is a really interesting question. One thing I'm experiencing on just like a personal level is I founded a nonprofit. We just went through the process and got our status last March, and it's opened so many doors for me. So for the people in Austin that are giving, and there are so many people in our community of all different economic backgrounds that are giving, it just allows them the best way to give and to help the artists they want to help. So, I mean, looking forward, I think if there is a way we could educate our up and coming musicians and the next generation how to like start their own nonprofits or get affiliated with a great one that's going to like align with their musical mission, I think that would just be so important to keep things going. So, but in terms of how to train these new folks to give, that is a great question.
You gotta meet in the middle. I mean, you
Yeah.
can educate musicians, but you also have to convince the Elons and
Yeah.
others that their money belongs in the community more.
I think a lot of it could be as simple as power of suggestion, going back to what Andy was saying about, new people moving here and how do they know what to do. Again, one of the fortunate kind of elements of our Austin DNA is we're a city of cool. Nobody wants to be uncool, and nobody wants to come here and do an uncool thing. So that's one of the reasons why music becomes an intuitive attraction. It should be uncool to move a big company here and not get involved with the music nonprofit. And maybe we just need to give them a little instruction manual and tell them this is kind of what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we make fun of the fact that Moody's name is on everything, but they fucking give.
That's true.
Like, I mean, that's amazing. Like,
It's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool.
It's
Yeah,
cool.
there you go.
I don't know that we want to play the Elon arena.
Let's go right to the front here.
So about 15 years ago and 1 month, there was a merger of a couple of companies, Live Nation and Ticketmaster. Tell me about your thoughts on that organization and what are the benefits and what are some of the challenges?
Unfortunately, I don't have to deal with either one of them.
He doesn't sell tickets.
This is being recorded.
Ticketmaster video.
No, I won't get in trouble for this, but Ticketmaster is the scapegoat or, whipping boy or whatever you want to call it for fees, all these fees that get added on. And maybe a long time ago, Ticketmaster was taking the lion's share of those fees, but now most of those fees go to venues, and venues live kind of by those fees because of the increased marketing costs of what it takes to sell tickets to consumers in this complex digital and old, traditional media landscape. And so that's the dirty little secret, is we let everybody complain about Ticketmaster when really we're taking those fees. We're dictating those fees, and we need those fees. So there's an optics problem that we just aren't very incentivized to fix because Ticketmaster continues to fall on the sword. Even dynamic pricing, people get real up in arms about, but dynamic pricing is essentially a combatant against secondary markets or scalping, or if Bruce, Springsteen was gotten hot water when all that stuff was in the news, and it was just his team saying, music. We made a comment earlier about maybe comparing to restaurants and things. Music is emotional, and so it's you can't upsell it the same way that you could a steak or a cocktail in this crazy Austin economy, because people feel like they have a right to it. So there's an accessibility thing, and as an artist, you want to maintain those optics. But if you sell a ticket for $150 and immediately see it being resold for $650, somebody on your team is saying, I think we undersold our market. And we don't want that money going to just somebody else that we don't even know. So we should try and keep that in the ecosystem. So it's not perfect, and it's kind of tainted by this, the old Ticketmaster, pardon my French, but the old ticket bastard mentality of them just being the devil. But ticketing platforms are a tricky business. It's essentially a POS for tickets, and it's just like a POS for a restaurant. It's kind of regional because you need salespeople and you need equipment. And this will be the one that really gets me in trouble with our ticketing platform. I'm still waiting for somebody to come along and just invent a better way. And if I wasn't running all these businesses, I would maybe try to pull aside some of our engineering PhDs here at UT and other tech startup people. It seems like there should be a better way. It seems like there could be a better way. It's going to be a mixture of technology and just kind of reinventing the way we think of that marketplace. But I'll stop there.
I would say I kind of disagree. I don't think Ticketmaster per se is the problem as one specific entity, simply because there are a lot of ticket companies, and a lot of ticket companies charge high fees. And to Will's point, a lot of times it is venues that are adding a few dollars that are helping cover marketing, staff, all those kind of things. But I think that's on a club level. When you jump up to the larger scale venue level, there is a bit of a monopoly happening. There's a reason that the government's investigating Live Nation and Ticketmaster right now, because the ticketing company is owned by the promoter, who also owns a number of the venues, who is block buying the entire tours for the nation, which means they can buy out the competition. They own the ticketing platform, they own the venue you go into, and they own the entire route. So, I have agents tell me all the time, like, man, I would do the show with you, but they said they'll cancel my other 2 shows if I do it with you. So we have to do these 4. That happens daily, or at least weekly. But if you own everything, you own a lot. And from an agent or a manager point of view, I don't even totally blame them, because you're getting offered more money, because they can pass that fee off to the customer and say, we're going to just add an extra $10. They're not even going to notice it. They're paying $95 for a show, $85, $95, they're not going to say anything. We can then kind of juice the deal and get the artist more money. Or, sadly, juice the deal and then pocket more money as a venue or an amphitheater. So I do think there's a lot of problems with it, and there's a reason there's talk of breaking it up, because the 2 entities work together and to kind of stifle independent growth by the competition, and at some point they'll win that battle if it keeps going. And then there won't be younger artists coming up. There won't be club level artists to play, because one particular company will dictate who gets to do that tour, who gets the night, who has the best deal, which agents they want to work with, what kind of artists they want to grow. And you won't be able to kind of independently create music and art if the only path forward is one company. And right now, if one company owns the 2 biggest entities, it's only a matter of time before they would own everything. It's already pretty hard. That said, to Will's point, the secondary market is wildly out of control. And while I do think the algorithm dynamic pricing, which is this weird robot tool that basically I think is kind of evil. I understand why it exists, but I still think it's kind of evil. When you go to try and buy a ticket at Moody Center, sometimes it's $127, sometimes it's $85, sometimes it's $250. Why is it different on different days? Because they're watching your buying patterns, and the algorithm sees how many clicks it gets, and then it turns up the price until the clicks slow down and people lose interest. It turns down the price to get you to start buying, and then it jacks the price back up. That's not normal. There's nowhere, you're never buying beans at HEB and you're like, oh shit, the price just went up. You set it back down. Like, there's no economy that does that. That's a wild thing to have happen in an artist-generated world where The artists usually dictate the price. They say, we want it to be $50 because that's what our fans want to pay. And then the promoter of the venue says, we want it to be more because the customer will pay it. Like, the customer may pay it. I do agree with that logic. That's kind of been the fight on the Ticketmaster side, is like this tool, and it's not just them. Access, which is AEG's ticketing company, a lot of ticketing companies have dynamic pricing now. But it's complicated because someone may pay that. I mean, if I want to go see some legendary band who's not going to tour forever, and it's Bruce Springsteen's possibly last show at the Moody Center, I'm probably going to pay more than I should have to pay for it because it's such an important show. But that said, if I paid $250 for that ticket, I might not buy the next 3 tickets I was going to buy had it been priced at $50 because I just spent $250 to see, whoever, Kendrick Lamar, and now I overspent. So it is taking more from the customer who's willing to pay it, but that's also taking away potential shows they would have bought tickets to, because unless you're just made of money, people are going to run out of cash at some point, and it's going to happen pretty quickly if the tickets are 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 times what they were originally. And with the dynamic pricing model, it has gotten kind of out of control. So.
I just want to go on the record saying I agree with all that part too. I didn't mean to seem so pro Ticketmaster. It's ironic that the things that people complain about the most sometimes are almost the smokescreen to this bigger thing, and there's a lot of truth to that. And what Graham said about the artist should get to set the price. So again, I'm not a technology person, but I feel like blockchain technology or something that could fix that price and prohibit it from being retraded. I'm just waiting for the tech folks to come save the day here.
Also, the only people dynamically pricing outside of this are airlines, and they suck too.
I was going to say airlines are the only other business. We did this thing at the Capitol with this nonprofit group we work with, and we were literally talking to Congress people about this problem. And that was the only other example we would say. And it was about what Will was talking about, the secondary market, which is the legal scalpers online. If you Google either of our clubs, a show, the first thing that pops up is not our venues. It is a sponsored ticketing site. And the first 10 are those. And they buy up the tickets, or they don't even buy them. They get you to pay for a ticket, and then they buy it. Their bots buy it. So the money's being lost to these third parties. The artists aren't getting it. The venues aren't getting it. It's super, super frustrating. But that was the example we were giving to the folks at the Capitol. We were like, look, Expedia charges $1 a ticket that they sell you or something. And they should. They're middlemaning a deal on behalf of a business, but it's regulated. There's no regulation for the third parties. So the secondary ticketing market, they can charge $1,000 more than your $30, and it's $1,030. They keep the full $1,000, you only get the $30. So it's out of control, and it's not being monitored.
Add that to the instruction list. Uncool to use second party.
Don't do it.
All right, your question back there.
Thank you. All right, there we go. That could be a whole nother panel, it sounds like. My name's Daniel Ronan. I'm the chair of the Tourism Commission, and there's several commissioners here, chairs and vice chairs from the Arts, Music, and Tourism Commission tonight. I'm wondering if you've heard about ACME, the Arts, Music, Culture, and Entertainment Department. It's the new department that's been announced by the city of Austin to bring together these somewhat disparate we'll call them mediums of our cultural scene. And I wanted to know, 1, if you've heard of it, 2, if you think it's a good thing, and 3, what would you like the city to do in addition to what they're doing now for the music industry, or the music scene as we're calling it?
I've just recently read about it. I'd love to know more about it. I really don't know beyond just a few paragraphs of what I might have read somewhere in Austin Business Journal or wherever. So kind of hard to say what more you could or should be doing without first knowing what the goal or mission is for the creation of that department. So I think, yeah, I'd love to hear more information about it. I think everybody would too, as well. But I'm aware of it at least.
Yeah,
that's a good start.
That's the first I've heard of it. That's interesting. That's a great name, by the way.
Yeah, I like it.
It's exciting to see these things coming online. Like we talked earlier, I mean, for 15 years, we would go to, I used to call them the cafeteria assemblies, where they'd call all the music people, in a room. This was before, I guess, well, it was before we got kind of organized and kind of started, having ways to share the information on digitally and stuff. But there were times where it felt like we were just talking in circles and it was never going to happen in regards to grants and programs and basically the city finding ways to invest back into the creative sector, specifically music. I think the pandemic sped that up. Like we've acknowledged, it kind of made everyone just reevaluate their priorities and what they were going to prioritize in moving forward. And it's just really exciting to see all this come online really in the last 3 years and hearing about new things like that. Rally Austin, which is the new name for Austin Economic Development Corporation, and things they're doing with the Iconic Music Fund. So exciting to live in a city that's doing it, and we got to keep doing it.
Sarah, do we have more questions? Or
Sure.
Okay.
This will be our last question, and then we invite all of y'all. We have drinks, food. We encourage you to keep talking, continue this conversation.
Free or dynamically priced?
Free food and drink.
See, that's what they all say.
Yeah.
All right, thank y'all very much. Great to see y'all. This is very exciting to hear about, maybe some upturns or the dynamism in the Austin music. What's the involvement, if any, in the new revitalizing of the old 6th Street efforts? And if there's anything being done, or will there, should there be? Tell us about that, if whatever you know.
You're in the neighborhood there.
I am in the neighborhood, and I have more good news to share, or optimistic at least. So Stream Realty Partners is the company that was stealthily buying up a lot of properties on 6th Street kind of during the pandemic. And I admit and have been honest with them that I did not like the original version of the plan, which was getting entitlements to maintain historical facade and build vertical. I'm also on the Board of Preservation Austin, and I like old buildings, and I just don't think it looks as authentic when there's, 3 levels of condo
fake
stacked on
facade,
top of it. Yeah. For whatever reason, for economic reasons, let's say, Stream has decided to change course on that project, and leasing is tough right now in downtown for a multitude of reasons, but they have a very long-term commitment to this old 6th vision. And what's so cool about it is they've worked with the Historic Preservation Office to sort of front load and green light historic renovations of these key properties. So when they're marketing them to a tenant, they're saying, I know it doesn't look like this now, but this is what the building looked like at one time, and if you sign a lease with us, we'll partner together on restoring this building. And I think that is amazing, and I've told them it's someday you'll look like geniuses, but they know it's just going to take a while, because how amazing will that be to have Pecan Street looking like this little, just something out of a movie, just seeing all these amazingly restored facades. So that is the current state of their vision, and they've been very welcoming in having us from Antone's come to some of their events and things, because I am encouraging them and reminding them that live music needs to remain a part of that story. Again, it's a tough fit because what they're doing is expensive, and it's an expensive market downtown right now. So they are listening and agree, and are exploring ways to, I think, to say it bluntly, I think they need like a few anchor tenants to kind of help with the finances, and then I hope that they follow through on then prioritizing some arts and cultural elements.
One quick follow-up. If 6th Street isn't a cesspool, is that better for Red River?
I mean, 6th Street has kind of its own beast. It has been for so long.
But I've got to either get through 6th Street.
Right.
I mean, even Antone's is a little too close to 6th Street for some people.
Sure.
I mean,
I see what you're saying.
The navigation of the
If 6th
violence
Street,
and vomit
Right.
that have become the the sort of hallmarks of Sixth Street.
That's,
and if it returns to mixed use the way it was in the 90s when Steamboat was next to an art gallery, next to a restaurant, next to a,
Yeah.
you know.
That's Michael Corcoran's other book, Violence and Vomit.
It's a tricky problem, and I don't typically like the term gentrification, but I think we can all agree that there's got to be a catalyst of kind of improving those structures and the kind of composition of businesses and tenants down there. And another thing that most people don't know is they've already started a pilot program. They're not doing it every weekend, but Sixth Street is not always closed off on the weekends anymore with the barricades. That's something that's been talked about for a long time because it kind of can harbor some of that puking and stuff. So it's once again, it's like these are things that I've heard about for 15 years, and we're actually starting to see them set in motion.
How would that, I'm just curious, but I'm fascinated about the stream thing with the revitalization. And by the way, Will, you got to give props, has been like keeping old Austin alive with like every business he's involved with is like taking what are the cool brands or cool buildings that we would have lost and giving it a new life, like brought Arlyn Studio back, you know, kept Antone's alive, all these great things. So I like that you're involved with this because often I feel like, and I'm guilty of this as well, in Austin some of us tend to like, Fun Fest is gone, I'm done with it, I'm starting a new fest. Emos is gone, I'm starting a new club. That's me, I've always been like, I gotta move forward. And then later I've been like, God, I wish I had fought for that one thing a bit more. Like, it's a bummer we don't have it. So I'm excited that you were involved with that, but those conversations you've been having about like keeping that, bringing those buildings back to life, how did they say, like, maybe this is above your pay grade, but did they say how they would do that business-wise? Because I could see why they'd be like, I'm just going to buy this block and build up because there's a lot of money in up. But how would they?
Well, and that building that is expensive, and those historical renovations are expensive too. So they're specifically targeting tenants that see the value in that authenticity. And that's why it's hard to it's hard to lead with a music venue.
Sure.
But I have seen the whole plan, and I think it's really compelling. And I hope that
That's exciting.
I hope that they're successful.
I think the Paramount and the State Theater are going to add to that too. I mean, they're in their big capital
Paramount's about to have
campaign,
a huge renovation.
and they're going to become an official. They're going for the National Historic Landmark status, I believe, or whatever the official name is. So they're going to be restoring the Paramount to its like full glory, exactly as it was. And the State, the facade will be, the same and looking old, but the inside is going to be completely like state-of-the-art, flexible seating. And I'm on the board at the Paramount as well, so I know these things. But it's exciting.
You guys inside baseball, these guys.
I don't know how I got to, you started things off, Andy, talking about nostalgia and, at what point did we become too nostalgic? And I don't know where I kind of became such a nostalgic soul, so to speak, but I always remind myself and others that we're a young city, and we have the benefit of learning from the mistakes of other markets through kind of the information age to hold on to these things. Totally. And there's a lot of cities that they just didn't know any better. When you think of any great city in the world that you've gone to for travel or whatever, you think of the architecture and those small businesses, and not grand architecture, just the mundane architecture, but somewhere along the line, they made an effort to save the texture of their city. And so I love it. Once again, I feel fortunate that we kind of got hip to that at a young age. It can get to be maybe too, there could be a point in which it's to a fault, but I think we're too young.
Agreed.
To be worrying about that.
Whenever I travel in older cities, I'm like, God, these buildings are amazing. In Austin, this would have been bought and torn down years ago for condos. Like, we keep nothing. Like, there's nothing left here. Like, everything has been built over. And I don't mind the progress because Austin is growing. It's going to happen. But there's a lot of pieces of the city that, like, we don't even think about, where you go to other places that have been around longer and San Antonio's twice as old. It's only an hour and a half away. We forget how new a city we are, but you're right. Like, we're losing so many gems, and if we can protect them, that'd be amazing.
Well, it sounds to me like the state of Austin music is on a pretty solid.
Never gonna end.
No.
Yeah, let's let Terry wrap
No,
it up.
I was about to end it, Andy. No.
He's landing the plane.
Can you bring that mic so he can drop it when he's done?
The state of Austin music is on a pretty solid foundation with a past and a history that I think we can all be proud of. And from just the last few minutes of this conversation, it sounds like the future is looking pretty fucking bright, too, with a lot of hope for a lot of positive change. So, there you go.
There you go.
On that note.
No, you did the mic drop.